I'm Joe Stookey. I'm from the University of Saskatchewan, and I was asked to talk about managing separation, maternal separation, which really is weaning. And I talked about sort of the options that we have to wean our calves and minimize stress. So traditionally, we did a lot of abrupt separation. That's traditional weaning, where we simply separate cows from calves. And I talked about how that increases the risk of sickness when they go directly to the feedlot. Some of the other options that have been developed recently are, in the last, say, 15 years, are fence line weaning, where we put cows on one side, calves on the other, and that seems to reduce some of the behavioral distress. The fact that mothers and offspring can see each other, you see less vocalizations, you see a lot less milling and walking, is obviously comfort. And when those strategies, fence line weaning has been linked with, say, on pasture, on good pasture, we get pretty good gains on those calves. Whereas sometimes abrupt separation, we could see a setback in gain as a reflection of how stressful that event is. The other newer development, I guess, is something that we've worked on is what we call two-stage weaning. And it started with this idea of trying to figure out what are the major stressors, what upsets the cows, what upsets the calves specifically. And we started with the very basic question of, do they miss the mother or do they miss the milk? And of course, the way you would answer that question is you have to sort of pull them apart and see what happens when you simply shut off the milk. And we had at that time some devices that we attached, little plastic nose clips you can put in the nose of a calf. And interesting enough, when you shut off the milk, we didn't see much change in behavior. Maybe the cow-calf pairs would be together, but we didn't see much vocalization at all. We didn't see any change in the amount of time spent eating or lying. We didn't see any behavioral indicators that those calves were stressed when we had shut off the milk. And when we were in that stage of that initial project, we thought, well, it must be all about when you miss the mother. When you take away the mother, that must be what causes all the distress. And so when we moved to the next phase, so these calves had wore these nose tags for 5 days, then we separated the cow-calf pairs, and we didn't see any distress at that point either. And that was sort of surprising, because we said, wait a minute, you don't complain if you shut off the milk, and now you didn't complain when we took away the mother. What's going on there? And of course, in retrospect, you think about that a bit, you go, well, if you go for 5 days without nursing, you're weaned. And so that really led to this two-stage weaning and the concept that in many ways it mimics natural weaning. Because what's so unnatural about abrupt separation is the fact that the mother and the milk disappear simultaneously. And in a natural environment, in a matriarchal society that cattle are, what you see is that the calves sort of are programmed to one day expect the milk is going to get shut off. But they're not expecting the mothers to disappear too, because they're joining that herd. And so two-stage wean has been an amazing sort of discovery, I guess, that shows us that you can have a weaning process that sort of simulates natural weaning, and it's not that stressful. And the important thing, we did a number of studies over the years looking at different periods of time wearing that nose tag. And as long as we keep it, say, between 4 and 7 days, we get a really good result. And I know a lot of producers are trying to couple their chores together, so they want to vaccinate at the same time as they put those nose tags in, and the vaccine label says, oh, it should be 14 days or 20 days. It's actually too long. It's not an ideal program. And so we're sort of thinking, do you need to vaccinate 14 days before you separate them, if in fact there's no real stressor to it? But I think you need to keep that period of time wearing those nose tags about 7 days. And I use the analogy, sort of like bacon and eggs. If you put them both in the skillet at the same time, take them out at the same time, you're going to be disappointed with one or the other. And it would be nice if we could put the eggs and bacon in for the same length of time, but it doesn't work. And I think that may be what happens with trying to vaccinate calves 14 or 21 days before you separate and putting the tags in that long. It doesn't work. And maybe the next step research-wise is to say, could we put them in at 7 days and vaccinate at the same time and get the protection we want? So anyway, that's some of the work that I talked about. We also know now with some recent surveys, sort of the adoption of these different strategies. We get about, and more producers seem to be adopting these low-stress weaning. I think we're at 70-some% that are doing abrupt separation. So we've dropped, it used to be about everybody, and now we've got about 18% or more doing fence line weaning. And in our recent survey, we have about 6% of cattle producers who are weaning with the two-stage process, wearing the nose clips. And it doesn't sound like much, 6%, but just like for our province of Saskatchewan alone, we have over 10,000 producers. That's over 600 producers that are now have adopted and switched over to two-stage weaning, all with the concept of trying to figure out ways to minimize that weaning stress, which we know puts calves at such risk. So I think that kind of wraps up what I talked about, and I'll leave it there.